Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Jonas Holdeman.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. And we want you to know, if you do or don't believe in a God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, we have open discussion, what we hope is good rational exchange of ideas, and free thinking of atheists and others, and agnostics and theists and so forth. So, go ahead.
Today's show topic is atheism, theism, and humanism.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of spans a...
Yeah, we got a lot of territory to cover. And I want you to know a little about the sponsors of our program. The Atheist Society of Knoxville has a fun show or a fun time at a bar or place of eating. Tonight it's at around 5:30.
Yeah.
And where's the place? Barley's, yeah, in downtown, old downtown. And then we're also sponsored by the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Now, for the down there at Barley's, look for a little book, maybe The God Delusion, sitting on the shelf there. It'll give you clues to, and open for fun and discussion and good opportunities to get to know people.
Okay, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. Mm-hmm. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. These are held in the cafeteria annex at the Goins Building at Pellissippi State Community College.
Yeah.
The program starts at 10:30, but come early for coffee and conversation.
Uh-huh.
On the second Sunday, we hold a Skeptics Book Club discussion. On the fourth Sunday, we are now alternating with a get-together in someone's home, which we call Reflections, which features a discussion with a potluck lunch, and alternating with some games and board games and things like that.
Uh-huh. And then late in the show, we'll give you the website to visit for additional details, including times and locations. And you can find the number on the screen there.
Okay. Do you have? I have a couple of things I can bring up for in the news.
Yeah, let's hear. Go ahead. Uh-huh.
Okay. I just got yesterday. I got my copy of Freethought Today.
Uh-huh.
Comes in a plain wrapper. So I remember when it was things came in plain brown wrappers. But there are a couple of things here. First, the Oklahoma School District rejects Hobby Lobby Bible class. So it seems that this guy named Green, who is Steve Green, who's a billionaire and very outspoken, created some kind of a curriculum on the Bible, and initially he had gotten approval by the school board to teach this in the schools. Then the Freedom from Religion Foundation heard about it and asked for further information. Found out it was very oriented towards Christian beliefs in particular.
Well, it's his orientation is not Christian, it's right-wing Christian. It is to the far right of evangelicalism, fundamentalism.
So anyway, the result was that the school board decided that he had to satisfy two criteria.
Uh-huh.
First, they would be allowed to inspect the curriculum,
mm-hmm.
and second, that he would provide financial support for any court cases that were brought against him. And then, as a result of failure to meet those conditions, then
there would be court cases. Yeah.
Then they turned down his program. I guess in here, I was just delighted to see that the Freedom from FFRF provides awards, monetary awards for student essays and so on. And there was just, this runs several pages of high school students and dealing with activism in their schools and so on. A couple get $1,000 rewards and a whole page of $200 rewards. And I found it quite interesting to read this. And finally, there was something on the last page here, if I can find it.
While you're looking, I want to mention on the academic study of religion is an interesting topic. It's academic studies of different religions are done in universities and done quite well by exceedingly well-trained people. The trouble within high schools is you usually have a one-line indoctrination, and the people aren't well-trained for it because it takes a lot of training to teach, multiple religions. It takes a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean...
And the school system is not prepared to train people for this. And those who want it sometimes want to have their particular version of Christianity. It's what they want. And
yeah, okay. There was something here I couldn't find about
go ahead.
The Westboro church in the news again. This time, the courts ruling in favor of a couple of members of Westboro who had been accused of desecration of the American flag, throwing the dirt and mud and so on. And the courts decided that was a expression of free speech, and they could not be challenged on that.
Yeah.
So I guess you win some and you lose some. Well,
well, some people treat a flag as a person, and that's different. It's not.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that I can't put my finger on a minute, but seems like FFRF in one community had entered into a contract with a billboard company to put up billboard signs in the community, and they were rather innocuous, but along FFRF themes, and the community passed rules, ordinances forbidding this, and so now they are faced with the problem of what are you going to do? I mean, we have a local government interfering with certainly a freedom of expression. But the situation there is quite different from here in Knoxville. The Rationalists of East Tennessee has tried on several occasions to get billboards. And it's not that their local ordinance is against it, but rather Lamar Advertising, the billboard company, has not allowed it, and what they do, the way they get around it is I guess they rent space for their billboards on different properties, and so they use the excuse that the owner of the property objects to the content, and so they will not accept the advertisements. So
well, if you have property that's your own property, you can put up your own billboard, unless you're in a zone in which you can't have billboards, and that'd be.
Yeah, but I mean, you presumably rent out this property for the use of the advertising company, where they make money on putting all kind of advertisements. I would think that not every billboard that goes up is subject to inspection by the property owner. But
that's the whole problem of private property.
Anyway, Joe, let's get into today's topic.
Well, another news item you might find interesting. One of the major politicians in Turkey declared birth control as treason. Oh. Sometimes we forget Europe and Russia used to have church control of state. We often forget that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into this later when we're talking about atheism and theism, especially in Russia. We often forget what we call today freedom of speech and religious liberty wasn't the tradition in Russia and Europe. And it still isn't the tradition in Russia yet. You have kind of a Marxist state union rather than church-state union.
Yeah, they always had or took the position that, in fact, it's biblical, and you could probably quote this, but I won't ask you to, that New Testament maybe, that people should support their government, their rulers. And so this appears in later times as the churches, the religious authorities, basically give the rulers the divine right to rule after they're approved. So now,
that's Romans.
I'll support you if you make me the king or whatever.
Yeah, that's Romans, the 13th chapter, and it's often been used in a variety of ways. Right now it's being used in China, and some of the Christian. By the way, China is one of the fastest growing Christian country. It will become what will be some call a Christian nation. But they're making, I think, some inroads with the government over there. It'll be interesting to watch, to see if they're going to repeat the mistakes of Europe to align church and state, or whether they're going to borrow from the United States of church-state separation. I would say if they want to have real growth of religion in China, have church-state separation, because the churches grow faster that way, and they apparently they learned slowly that way in Europe.
Yeah, but on the other hand, in Europe, where they still have state support of religious
but it's fading
cathedrals and so on. What has happened is that the public reaction is such that the majority of the population is often non-secular.
Exactly. So religious liberty is actually to the advantage of people who are religious, as well as to us. Well, let's move on to our topic. Atheism, theism, and what do you mean by atheism anyhow?
Theism is the belief in God or gods, and by kind of extension to supernatural. Anything beyond human capabilities. And so atheism would be just the opposite of that. It would be a denial of deities and any phenomena beyond the natural world.
Yeah, just simply, literally, it means no God. That's A is just the Greek word for non.
But as you have pointed out, on many occasions, Joe, is that everyone is atheistic towards other people's religion.
Yeah. Everybody's an unbeliever. To be a believer means if you believe in X, and if it contradicts Y, then you're a non-believer in Y. That's just logic. We teach our kids to be both believers and non-believers. Depends on what it is they believe or don't believe in. So, but let's move into versions of atheism. Put it this way. A better way of putting this, you have atheism is simply no God, and then if you're an atheist, you have other versions, more positive versions. Atheism is a negative view. It says you don't believe.
Yeah.
But you can't go around just saying what you don't believe. You got to also have some constructive beliefs in what you do. And those who are not atheists have diversity of opinions, just as theists have a diversity of opinions. And for example, you have materialism. You have some atheists who are materialists, and then, of course, materialism is various versions of that. You're familiar with Ayn Rand. And what would you think her version of materialism would be?
Well, I'm not. I haven't read her work, and from what I've heard, I'm not much of a libertarian in some respects.
I got you.
And I think she was kind of extreme.
Well, she is an atheist, she says, but she is also she wrote the book The Virtue of Selfishness.
Yeah.
And not self-interest, virtue. And it is a gospel of greed. I mean, there's no other way to put this to be accurate. It's the only virtue, the only thing you owe to any other person is hands off, she says. Now, this seems to me to be one version of materialism. Another version of materialism is simply, most people understand this, is you're just out for the buck only. It's just out for money and yourself. And that there are other uses. See, what we're trying to say is you have to find out how people use their words rather than just assume that there's some great definition in the sky. There isn't. And you have to find out how they use their words. And so some people who are materialists are not materialists in Ayn Rand's sense. They're holding the universe is mostly atoms and atomic structure and subatomic particles and all of this. And that's all, and that's what reality is. And there are other versions of materialism that we won't go into, but that's one version that's called sometimes materialistic reductionism. Depends on how do you interpret that. And Karl Marx was opposed to that because he thought, and some of the communists, because they thought it reduced everything to physiology and physics. And what Marx wanted to emphasize is part of being human is being active, the activity of being human, not just a passive reaction like billiard balls and pebbles, and then reduce those to atoms, and we're all just knocked about by kind of determinism. Now, he did hold to economic determinism, which we'll get into later, but he was trying to say, interesting about Marx is he's a combination of, seem to me, big contradictory things. He is a combination of economic determinism, and yet he's got some very interesting psychology. And when I took a course in this up in Cambridge, the teacher at that time didn't seem to understand the psychology of Marx. Later on, he wrote a book. It seemed to me he did understand it very exceedingly well. And Marx understood in the world of work at that time, workers were alienated from their work. He used the word alienated a lot, from their work. And so what he was calling for is a revolution, because you can see, if you are in a workforce and everything is determined by the economic structure, that's going to affect your marriage, wouldn't you think? Yeah. It's going to affect your family relations. And so that kind of determinism he was worried about, and he wanted a revolution. Now, whether or not his solution was useful or not, that's another.
Yeah. Well, now were the Luddites activists in that sense?
And they had the same problem, and we have the same problem today. Because it seemed to me, and I mean this is my view, but I think we're gradually fading out a lot of the middle class.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you got corporations now who work people 39 hours so they won't have to pay insurance. And yet these same guys come up with this libertarianism, don't want to have government welfare program. Well, how are these people supposed to pay their hospital bills, you see?
Yeah, of course, the Luddites were famous for throwing a wrench in the machinery so to wreck it to as a protest against the machinery and so on that was controlling their lives. And so the thought just occurred to me, maybe some of these people, the hackers who are throwing code wrenches in all kind of things in company operations, in government operations, and so on. Maybe this is an expression of modern Ludditism.
Well, I'd have to know individuals who are doing the hacking to know this. Some of them I just don't know, don't have any information enough to. They function the same way. Although the Luddites you can sympathize with because they were simply being put out of their jobs. And they were caught up in the Industrial Revolution, and they got put out of their work, and there weren't other jobs available quick enough. And it sounds good in statistics, but if you got to eat as an individual, that's another ballgame. And that's what bothered Marx.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what has happened over the past several years, where people lost their jobs due to a recession, but then those jobs have never come back.
Exactly.
Instead, the economic powers have readjusted to deal with a smaller labor force and the employment tricks that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Ayn Rand had the faith, and it was a faith that the capitalistic system would eventually readjust, and this would solve itself if you kept the government out. But I remember reading about people saying, in the long run it works, but they would say, as individuals, in the long run, we're dead. In other words, in the long run, we don't live in the long run. Our lives are too short.
Yeah, that's certainly true if you're viewing it on a time scale. But on the other hand, in terms of the power that a corporation or a millionaire, billionaire, millionaire, I must throw aside because $1 million is not so much as it used to be. But we're billionaires and can influence. Well, I mean, they have the power. If they had the power to operate their businesses and corporations for their personal profit, along the lines of the materialism that you described, then I think the natural tendency would be, well, to heck with the people. Let's just get as much from them as we can. And so the only other force stronger than these very wealthy industrialists would be the federal government. And so the government, local, state, federal, and we must appeal to those powers, hopefully controlled democratically, to place a limit on what these businesses can do.
That's what Teddy Roosevelt was about, really.
You hear the Republicans saying, well, all these regulations affect business, limit business, and darn right.
Well, let's move now. We can spend the whole program on this.
Got on this from materialism.
What I think Marx meant by dialectical materialism, he saw the word dialectic is a very catchy word, that you have a process going and that it generates its own contradiction. Or I would say its own conflict. And it's a little bit before Marx. I mean, not before Marx, before Darwin's notion of the survival of the fittest. And of course, Darwin understood the importance of the emotional life and cooperation, I think, better than Marx on a more local level. Marx understood, especially as Lenin and Stalin interpreted it, they funneled it mostly into politics.
Mm-hmm.
But well, that's a long story. We don't want to get into all of that. Another version of non-supernaturalism is naturalism, and that's the scientific method in which you try to study nature. As I mentioned before in this program, the early Hebrews in their Greek translation had a word like logos, which we get the word logic, that the word world is orderly, and they had, and in the Greek land you had physis, from which you get your word physics, and they were trying to say the world is God's world, and it has logos, it has not chaos, but cosmos, order. And they were gradually trying to work towards studying, and that's what that's been your profession, study the order of nature. So there's some theists out there, getting over to the theists, who hold that nature is simply the activity of the deity. So if you want to study the deity, that's called general revelation. It's revelation for everybody. Now that kind of theism and naturalism among atheists have a lot in common. I'm trying to find commonality. I'm not like Bob O'Reilly or whoever it is on TV. He's always trying to find enemies. I think we need to find points of contact with each other. And there are theists who are evolutionists. If you're a non-theist, you won't agree with all this, but you nevertheless have so much in common. It's terribly important, it seems to me, to focus on that.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
Of course, what we're more familiar with is the anthropomorphic type of God, the one that
Right.
people pray to and ask favors of. And I think it's pretty clear that that's a futile kind of approach.
I remember in class, of course, when I taught world religions, one of my students asked, "Do you pray?" And of course, my answer is, my views is none of your business. I'm teaching various views, and if you think you want to know my view, would you change your mind just because I believe it? And they said no. Well, I said, well, then it's not relevant. But the point is, if all the prayers are answered, this would be one chaotic, dangerous world to live in. And so even if there were prayers, there's got to be some kind of grand computer, as it were, to discriminate these prayers. And some people tend to think of them, prayers, as escape from reality. Go, we have someone calling in. Go.
Hello, this is Charles from Central.
Oh, hello, Charles. How are you today?
Go ahead.
Well, I thought I'd call in and make some comments. One of the worst problems we seem to have in communication between the various theist groups, Muslim,
Go ahead.
and Christian denominations. Can you hear me?
Yeah, faster. Let's go.
Okay. One of the worst problems we seem to have with communicating with the theists, between theist and anti-theist and atheist, is how we use the same word for different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
It's much like the word score, S-C-O-R-E, will have multiple different meanings. So the mindset of some atheists and some theists seem to have locked onto a certain meaning for each word, oftentimes. This causes miscommunications.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead. What's your next point now?
My next point is if we want a dialogue between us and them, we have to have not the great debate like Richard Dawkins and so forth are having
But you have
all
to
the
have
time.
you have to have common definitions of a word in order to communicate. Okay.
Right.
I
Sit
agree.
down and talk to one another.
Good.
I've seen debates done that way, and this allows us to explain each other's viewpoint. Of course, with some of them, that doesn't work at all because they're locked into that definition, and they can't accept anything else.
Well, you have a real good point. Sometimes you can do it this way. First of all, it's important to understand the other person's definition, how he's using the word. And then if you're using it differently, just say, well, here's definition 1 and definition 2, and see if you can talk on one version for a while, then you can switch over to another version. But I see your point, so you don't talk over each other's head. I think that's your point, isn't it?
Yes, or actually we're talking past each other.
That's a good point you're making. Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. I think that's a really good point, is that we often hear a word and we have a definition, but we're not sure we're using the same meaning. And so we talk, as he says, we talk past each other. And
yeah, well, I don't know that it would be to our advantage to be restricted to a common definition. Like in the legal system, they use certain terms. You look at a contract, and you can't understand what is being said. They don't say it in plain language. But the thing is, in plain language, it could have different meanings. But in their language that they speak to themselves, it has precise meaning. But
technical meanings and then ordinary language. Ordinary language and technical language.
But then it's not understandable to the rest of us.
Okay. So it's obligation to, if we want to communicate, to reveal our meanings. I mean, that's just common. The word common sense sometimes means common consensus on definitions.
That word common has multiple meanings. And common sense might mean, you might be saying, this is something that everyone has. It's a natural understanding of things. But on the other hand, it could mean the sense that we have in common, that considered as a group, kind of expressing similar thoughts and so on.
That's more like common consensus.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Usually the word common sense, or originally the word common sense, I think comes from Aristotle. You got various senses and you put them together. And, but we wouldn't have that before. Now, I mentioned in Russia, you had this church-state union with the Russian Orthodox Church, and it was pretty much a tyranny. And what happened in Russia is that it was turned upside down. It looked as if it was turned upside down, but you basically kept the same tyranny, only it simply was a version of atheism, and then a particular version of dialectical materialism. And other versions of naturalism were not necessarily included in that. And the problem is that you had the state determining the ideology. And I think what we've been trying to say on this program is it's good to have a state in which you have a variety of ideologies and a variety of different viewpoints that can debate this out and have open forum and learn from each other.
And each one serve as a check on the others.
Yeah, and even in freedom of religion, you have freedom to change from one religion to another. In Russia, you didn't have that.
Yeah.
And in parts of Russia and parts of Europe, in one time, you did not have that option. That you get murdered. And in still parts of the world today, you have this.
Yeah, so we see historically that the Marxists and Leninists and so on recognize the danger of the theocracy there, and they tried to suppress it. And so with the end of the communist era, what we see now is a resurgence that in some sense we see Putin wanting to resurrect the power of the church. Surely he wants to use that to control.
He's a KGB man. He knows how to use that. And we have our own politicians here who are doing the same thing, or would like to.
Oh, yes.
So we have to be aware of this. Well, we got a program.
Yeah, Joe, let's take a little break here. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern in the Knoxville Community Access Television Channel on Knoxville Community Access Television Channel 12 or 194, depending on your local television network. Tell your outer friends to see us streaming online on ctvknox.org.
Okay, and you can see on their screen the call number, and it's a live program. And the Atheist Society of Knoxville meets 2 times a week. We have evening meeting up for fun and drinks and conversation, and community and outreach for atheists, agnostics, and free thinkers, and others who want to come and join for a good, open-minded discussion and friendship.
Well, Sam, can you play the videos now? Promotion for RET and Ask.
Area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else? Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people.
Hey, are you guys accepting questions?
Discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Okay, we will. I'm sorry about that. He didn't understand.
Okay.
Can we come on? Can we take her? Okay.
Mother.
Yeah. Okay. Come on in now.
Oh, hey, are you there?
Yeah. Can you lower your voice? You're coming out real loud.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to put my son Jeremiah on the phone real quick. He just has a couple questions.
Okay. Go ahead. Let's hear. First question was, what is atheism? Apparently we didn't communicate too well.
Okay, Jeremiah, are you there?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, Jeremiah.
Go ahead.
You had a question.
Yes.
Well, go ahead, Jeremiah.
Ask us.
Go ahead.
Oh,
shucks. We lost him. Okay.
Well, Jeremiah, I hope you'll try again.
But we're on the topic of what is atheism.
It's not often that we get young people calling in, and
we hope we'll get more. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jeremiah had asked about what is atheism. The essential point is that it is a belief that there is no God.
That's it. That's basically the meaning. Yeah. That's it.
But there is a whole spectrum of not believing.
Yeah. In other words, after you say that, then you have people who are atheists have a great diversity of opinion as to what they do believe. See, and I think it'd be wrong to put all of them in the same category. You got everywhere from Marxists to got reductionistic materialism. You got all kinds of interactionisms, and all versions of naturalism, and it's a rich heritage.
Yeah, but there's also a spectrum from full belief without uncertainty, to full non-belief, and probably everyone fits somewhere in between.
Well, nobody goes through life with total non-belief. I mean, that you'd have to be dead.
Yeah, of course.
So the only there's no such thing as belief per se. It has to be an X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so, everybody is both a believer and an unbeliever in all kinds of directions. So you have to figure out what they're talking about, and you have to listen.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there are those who are absolutely certain. They say that there is a God that is all powerful and all knowing, all moral, and all of this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And there are those who say absolutely there is not a God. But if you look at those who are absolutely certain, and you say, well, are you willing to stand on a roof and say, I believe in you, God, save me, catch me, and then jump off?
Well, most of them would say that's not a version of God they believe in. Would you agree?
Yeah. Okay. Then on the other side, if you ask someone who says absolutely there is no God, really there is some limitation to that. Because they are not all knowing, and must recognize that there is a certain possibility.
If you are an atheist, technically you say nobody is omniscient, including an atheist.
Yeah. And
all of us have an enormous amount of ignorance, more ignorance than knowledge.
And then kind of in the middle, there are the agnostics, Jeremiah. And these are people who say, well, I just don't know that there is or there isn't. And so all of us, I think, have a certain degree of agnosticism in our beliefs. And for some, there is more certainty, and others there's less certainty.
Yes. And it works out in practice, which way you go on these things. I mean, all of us say, this is the best view I think. This is the view I think makes more sense, and I'm willing to go with it. That doesn't mean you think you know everything. You'd be a fool to say that.
Well, but I think you would agree, Joe, that atheism has been given a bad rap, to be called an atheist is derogatory in most people's minds.
I don't think some of these preachers are lying when they do this. I think they really don't know. They don't know enough. So their mistake is to pretend they know more about people who are atheists.
Yeah.
And you have to know. See, my point, there are some, as you well know, some very mean, wicked atheists, but that's not because they're atheists. You see?
Well, okay, so, Joe, the point I was going, and Jeremiah, the point I was trying to get to is there are a lot of people who call themselves agnostics. And I think that many of them, perhaps most, are more inclined towards atheism, but because of the public stigma, it is safer for them to say, well, I just don't know.
Well, you have a good point, because some people in our culture think of atheism as people who have no morals. I've heard people say this, and but I think you could agree that there are some people who caricature theism. In other words, they pick out the worst elements and claim that that's what real theism is, and then pick out the worst people they know who are atheists and make that the atheists. And we all know that's cheating. And I'm trying to argue, and I think you are too, we both know good Christian people, and we know good atheists, and they have an awful lot in common. What I'm trying to say is they have an awful lot in common. We got another caller. Go ahead. Another caller, please. Oh, can you hear us? Go ahead, our caller.
Well, hello, yes, this is Faithless Forrest. I'm at home with an eye patch on because I have received the technology of new vision.
Surgeon.
But I'm listening to the show today, and I heard your caller call in to ask about what atheism is and your answers, and I wanted to help you with that. I haven't heard you. Are you guys hearing me yet?
Yeah, we can. Go right ahead.
Okay, I understand that, I've been in the studio. Sometimes the audio can be confusing. Well, your definition of atheism and agnosticism, I think, misses one point that I always try to follow up and be more specific on.
Good.
And for that young listener, I want to make the following point. I will claim to be a strong atheist and a Gnostic atheist with respect to many gods, meaning I believe there is enough information that we can rule out some gods. In other words, I don't want the conversation to get lost in thinking that, we have to pretend that there's a possibility of the Christian God, when what maybe many of us are saying is, we can't rule out all gods. And I think the way to tackle this is to talk about Aztec mythology. There is an Aztec god. His name is spelled Tonutiuh. I've got no idea how to pronounce it, but it might be
but anyhow, go ahead.
Or something like that. And he's a sun god. And I think that he's one of these gods that they felt they had to, cut someone's heart out every once in a while on the top of their temples, or the sun wasn't going to come up. Now, if that's their, and so that's a god that they've postulated. Now, I'm fond of saying that I'm pretty sure that God doesn't exist.
Good.
And my assuredness is that God doesn't exist is about the same as my assuredness that you, Joe, and you, Jonas, are real people. In other words, I can't know everything. I can't even know that you're not, make-believe people. But that's really not a very useful thing to entertain, meaning it just doesn't get us anywhere to assume that the people we talk to aren't real. And that this sun god, that if you didn't cut the hearts out of your conquered enemies every once in a while, the sun wasn't going to come up. And I try to sum it up by this. I'm pretty sure that they stopped cutting the hearts out of people on the top of those temples down in Mexico, or the tourists would have reported it by now, don't you think?
I would think so. Well, you have a good point.
And I feel I have to always say that let's examine at least one God and demonstrate how we can rule it out. There is no reason on this planet anymore to be agnostic about this Egyptian god whose name is so unpronounceable, Tonutiuh or something like that.
But that's dead. I got you.
Yes. Now, and once we've demonstrated that there's no good reason to believe in that, we might creep a little closer to Western civilization and talk about the ancient Egyptian gods, the ancient Roman gods. I meant Greek gods, and then we modernized them to Roman. The Roman gods, are all over in our language. We have references to Jupiter and Aphrodite and things like that, that come into our culture. We've also got Norse gods. The days of some of our days of the week are named after Norse gods.
Thor's Day, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't have to believe that there's really a possibility that these gods are real, just because they're sprinkled all over our culture. And then finally I get to the God that is foundational for everyone who claims to have some sort of descendant of an Abrahamic religion. You know, was there really a God that once made a talking snake, and that talking snake apparently undermined his plans for a good garden? And apparently the gardeners had to be expelled after this talking snake undermined his plan. Now, I think with the same certainty that we can rule out the ancient Aztec gods, the ancient Egyptian gods, the ancient Greek gods, the ancient Roman gods, and the ancient Nordic gods, we can rule out Yahweh.
You know what's interesting, Lee, on this?
Yes.
Some of the creationists who want to put creationism in the public school, they don't want to now talk about the biblical God that much, because when you get to nailing down the specifics, like this Yahweh talking in the Garden of Eden, trying to find Adam and Eve as if, you know, he's not omniscient, and other things, slaughtering the firstborn of the Egyptians.
Yes.
That kind of God, that makes it move toward atheism. So, in other words, they keep watering it down because they can see it's dying the death of 1,000 qualifications.
1,000 qualifications. Yes. Well, that's great. I thought you were going to make a slightly different point, or maybe where I thought you might go is that if you dig into the Bible, you can find whatever you want. So you can find and choose pieces to make a loving God. You can also find a God that says you must respect authority. And I can see where for people in some churches where they've got a leader that is a little megalomaniac, that he really wants to emphasize those portions of the Bible so that he can have some of that authority worship rub off on him.
But Forrest, our third topic on the title is humanism, and I think that of the various religions, those parts that we can admire would be the humanistic part. And so I guess what I would like to see more is extracting those humanistic principles from all of the different visions and
exactly. In other words, we don't all have to have the same metaphysical views to have common ethics. We can differ and still recognize that we have a lot in common in terms of our ethical behavior toward each other.
Well, Joe, you used a word metaphysics that I can't help but think it needs a definitional slide as well. But barring a slide, why don't you tell us what you mean by metaphysics?
I'll tell you where it came from. You had in the Alexandrian Library, I think, a lot of books, and then over here on physics, and over here were other books in philosophy, and those were the books metaphysik. The word meta means after, after physics. In other words, in the library, just those books after physics. And what it amounts to is, for example, you had in the pre-Socratics, you had Heraclitus saying the whole universe is in flux according to logos, by which he meant structure and order. Now, this is not scientifically testable yet, but it's a metaphysical background for getting some kind of order and structure so you can start doing science.
Yeah, in a way, the way meta is used is kind of a theory of theories.
Theory of theories, yes. That's good enough.
The abstract structure that underlies
Naturalism is a metaphysics. Supernaturalism is a metaphysics. It's the underlying structure. That's a good way to put it, it seems to me. By the way, I think you can make a case, borrowing, Lee, from what you suggested earlier, I think you can make a case that some versions of evangelical Christianity could be called atheism, and I'll try to make a case. Some versions today of theism say that God is good. They use the word loving Father, and the prophet Hosea compares God to a caring mother, and there are all kinds of passages in the Bible, the Old and New Testament, about forgiveness and goodness applied to the deity. But you analyze so much of the evangelical view, and it looks like it won't measure up enough to be a God, and I'd call that a version of atheism. It just doesn't measure up to this kind of high moralistic theism that's at least projected as the ideal. Am I making sense to you?
I tend to say that if something is not interacting with us, if all it is the laws of nature, that it makes no sense to call that a God, because the laws of nature don't respond to our prayers, to our internal little thoughts or our internal dialogue that some people call prayer. Well, hey, thank you for letting me talk about my claim of being a strong Gnostic atheist with respect to Yahweh and that Egyptian sun god. Okay. I'm going to clear the line. I hope you get some more callers. Bye for now.
Well, thank you, Forrest. It's always good to talk with you.
A good Gnostic atheist. I like that. Okay.
Oh. So we're down to about 2 minutes, Joe, and I guess our humanism part has kind of been neglected.
We'll have to do a whole program on that because we just let it. I wanted to mention a version of theism that is often overlooked. And Brightman, see, the problem of suffering and evil was a big problem for theism because you had the notion of God is omniscient and powerful and in control. Now, you got all of this suffering and so forth. How do you explain all of this? We got another caller. Do we have another caller? Hurry.
Be quick.
Go.
Hello.
Go.
Am I on?
You're on. Hurry.
Okay. Well, I've just got a couple of corrections here.
Go.
Survival of the Fittest was by Herbert Spencer. Darwin did use it later, but he didn't coin that.
Right.
And also, it's not Bob O'Reilly that's on Fox who talks to angels and such. That's Bill O'Reilly.
Bill, thank you. You're right.
Also, he was mentioning this part about using definitions. You got to find out what people's definitions are. That's why I tend to use the dictionary, so I don't have to ask people what their definition of door or foot or something like that is in a conversation. The Live Dictionary pretty much does that, which is why I have a question about your atheism and theism, because according to most of the dictionaries, theism is a belief in a personal God from the Greek, whereas deism is a belief in a God, but it's not a personal or a good or a God that does anything within people's lives. So if you come down to atheism under those definitions.
Well, caller, I need to interrupt, and we're past time to start wrapping things up. If you want to contact us before the next show, you can send us email or voicemail at 865-272-9060, and continue to watch us on knoxtv.org.
Okay, one more thing, though.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock.